There was a small door that led to the attic space in my bedroom, and it became a habit that I would shut the door as I walked into my bedroom a few times a week. I didn't think anything of it, and just assumed my mum didn't close it all the way when she left it. After a while I made the mistake of joking with her when she made a comment about me not picking up after myself, and I said something like, "Every night I have to close the attic door behind you, how about you shut it all the way when you're done?" She then informed me that she hadn't been in the attic for months. I asked my brother and my father. None of them had. So then I started to pay real close attention to it, making sure it was closed in the morning, checking it after school, and checking after dinner, then heading up to bed. And what do you know? It was open. After a few months of wondering, studying, experimenting, I thought I'd see what happened if I just didn't shut the door. I opened the door before school and checked it after school. Still open. Closed it after dinner. Still open. Before bed. Still open. Now, I'm laying in bed, mind going crazy with the open door across the room. I decide to check it out, so I roll over and focus on the black space into the attic. That is when I see a face staring back at me. I bolt downstairs, wake my parents up, get ridiculed by my brother and switch bedrooms with my brother and move into a new house about 6 months later due to an expanding household. And what do you know? My new physics teacher and his wife actually bought our house. I could have forgotten all about the events and chalked it up to me having an overactive imagination. But then, I had discovered in my senior year how awesome our physics teacher was, and it became my favorite class by far and favorite teacher. At the end of senior year, my friend and I took our VHS camcorder around, doing mostly silly things, but then took it to my old house to see what they'd done with the place. We got a very fun tour. I got to tell stories about all the projects my dad did that were still a part of the house. Then the wife led us upstairs and showed us the sewing room. So I jokingly ask, "Notice anything strange about this room?" And her face goes blank. On camera she asks what I mean, and I try to shrug it off but end up saying something about the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, it's open, and then tells us that the second day of being in the house, their dog, a German Shepherd, had gone into that room, but would not go back downstairs. He started barking and could not be consoled, then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and running off. The dog did not come back until the next day, and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads upstairs since. I had the initial thought that I could show my parents and brother the story I had on film, but I decided to just let it be. The attic is the space in the house that runs parallel to the second floor, not above it. I was 11 to 12 when this was going on, so I did not immediately suss it all out. When I told my family that I saw a face, it was just my brother that ridiculed me. My father definitely would have checked for an actual human because of one of the first comments he made was about a family that recently had a coin collection stolen from their house across the street. The event itself was easy to shrug off, because I could have chalked it up to a lot of other possibilities. It wasn't until 5 years later that it became freaky. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, it's open, and then tells us that the second day of being in the house, their dog, a German Shepherd, had gone into that room, but would not go back downstairs. He started barking and could not be consoled, then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and running off. The dog did not come back until the next day, and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads upstairs. This did not make me a believer in the paranormal. I told the story as a collection of details, not a confirmation of ghosts. But what it did do was never make me a non-believer. That face, it was expressionless, dimly lit, through a door smaller than a 2x4, with a knob that had to be turned in order to open it. I wish I still had the VHS. This was from over 25 years ago now, and I moved a lot after high school, and the tape sadly never made it through all those moves. I am the youngest of 4 brothers, all a year apart. At this time I was about 9, and our family friend was spending the night at our place. We lived in a 2-story house with a basement. At this time my mother was single and dating a lot, so during this particular night she was away. We saw how to make a Ouija board on this episode of a show called Mystery Hunters, a Canadian kids channel, YTV. So we decided it would be a fun thing to try while we had the house to ourselves. So we cut up an old cardboard box and made a Ouija board from it. We put felt on the bottom of the triangle thing so that it would slide better, and it worked pretty well. We all tried putting our fingers on the triangle and asking questions, but got no response. Then me and my brother asked a question to the likes of, "Is there a demon here?" And the triangle started to move. We looked at each other and the expression on our faces showed that it was neither of us moving the triangle. We immediately got scared and ran into the kitchen. When we got there, we heard a crash come from the living room. It sounded like our TV fell off the wall unit. But when we ran back, we saw that nothing was wrong. After this, we decided to grab a Bible and read. The first words we read in unison were, "God's people are doomed." Frightened by this, we turned on the TV and saw it was Dave Chappelle, so we assumed it was going to be something funny. But when the audio began, the first words from Dave were, "And all the people died," to which the audience started laughing, and then it went to a commercial. Freaked out by both of these strange and unlikely things happening, the waterworks began, and we got up and ran upstairs crying and screaming to my brother's bedroom. When we got up the stairs and into his bedroom, we heard footsteps that sounded exactly like ours run up the stairs after us. Immediately I assumed it was one of my brothers or our friends late up the stairs. But then we realized we were all in the room and no one passed by the door. We began to panic, so we held each other, freaking out. It's hard to say if we heard anything after this point, so this was the last that happened for now. 2 hours later, me and my brother, the bravest of the 4, decided that this might be all in our heads, and that we would go play video games on my mum's computer in her office, Diablo 2 to be exact. The door to her office had no handle, so my brother pushed the door open, and immediately after he pushed the door, it slammed back on his arm, and all the way from the basement we heard clear and loud laughter. The only way I can describe it is it was the sound of a witch that echoed through the entire house. At this point we ran down the stairs, out the door into my grandmother's house, which was down the street, and waited for Mum to come home. I'm not sure if she completely believed us, but this was when we were kids. I'm 23 years old now, and this story sticks out as the only and craziest paranormal experience I have ever had. This happened to me a number of years ago. An altercation between my parents and I left me without a home. Don't worry, we're cool now. It was all my fault. Definitely shouldn't have brought those drugs into the house, but being a stupid 18-year-old with no money, I was desperate. However, being kicked out of the house put me towards the straight and narrow. I had to find a job, as at the time, I was just sitting at home playing Xbox for most of the day, to the point that my parents' frustration grew immensely. This is why this story happened in the first place. I needed to get a job, and a friend of mine worked at a local movie theatre and told me that they always needed staff. Their turnover was something insane. So I got in touch, and within 3 days he was giving me an interview. I show up, and he smirks at me, and we both just laugh in the interview room. He asks me some generic, chilled out questions, and at the end says, "Yeah, Brian, you got the job." It was more the formality than anything. And by the end of the week, I have my uniform and my rota, and I'm going to be paid eventually. I actually moved in with him for a few weeks just to get off my feet, and we were having the best of times at the movie theatre. There's not that much work to do, to be honest. It was a small town, and the movie theatre was the only one in town, so it was popular during the weekends, but during the weekdays, there wouldn't be much going on, especially not during the day. Now, this movie theatre was old. Really, really old. I want to say about 1910 or something like that. Point being, we had this dark and eerie basement at the bottom that housed all sorts of old things. It was creepy, and it had those lights that take ages to turn on. I used to call them the stagger lights. We go down the stairs to the basement every once in a while to store old movie posters, cardboard cutouts and things like that might be helpful in future, or that we may use as giveaways and prizes to keep sales in the theatre and have people come back. We're good like that. Don't just throw them all away. In any case, our trips down to the basement were frequent enough to make me afraid of it. It was dark, a little bit damp, and smelled. It always had this strange sensation, like I was being watched in the dark. To explain, it was a very big, dark room, right underneath one of the main theatres, with huge supporting pillars. It looked like a car park nearly. It was that big. At the edge, there was a small booth with a glass window. I still have no idea what was supposed to be there. Was that security? In any case, we didn't actually have security. Point being, this was just a very creepy place. Lots of old things, old boxes, and stuff that people had for the most part forgotten. After a few months of working there, I had gotten into the routine. I was actually quite a good worker, and me and my friends got along excellently, and the theatre was doing great business-wise. It was on one of these days where I didn't have much to do that my boss comes up to me and asks if I'd like to do a bit of overtime. Me, being young and hungry for money, asked him exactly what this entails, and he leads me down the stairs to the basement when I get a pang in my stomach. Oh no. He tells me that he wants me to organize and dispose of whatever we don't need here. That I need to make a list of everything we have, organize it, so that he can go through the list and let me know what is to be kept and what is not. And once that's done, for us to then organize what's left. He said he wasn't sure how long this whole thing would take, but that he would like me to stay overtime or before my shift started, whichever was convenient for me, and try and do as many hours as it took to sort this out. The pay for doing this task was quite good, and the fact that he hadn't told me how many hours it would take meant that I could go as fast or as slow as I wanted to, which is nice because it was such a chilled environment. So I started early one Friday afternoon, got into the theatre around 8, and being the only person in there, went down to the basement. I started looking through the boxes, loads of old random stuff, magazines from the town that we were featured in, old posters, old merchandise, loads of things. I even found a really old projector, and I wondered if I could take it home if no one wanted it, or if it still worked. As I was going through the stuff, minding my own business, do I hear something from behind me? It was coming towards that funky little booth in the corner that I still didn't know what it was. I wondered if it could be a rat. I hate rodents of any kind, and didn't have anything to protect myself, so I grabbed the nearby broom and started quietly making my way over, seeing if I heard the noise any sooner. Just as I was about to reach that booth, do I hear a noise again, and I jump. It sounded like cans. Cans being stepped on or moved around. My head was hidden behind a pillar. As I composed myself, I moved over and peeked around the pillar. There was a pair of feet hanging outside the booth on the floor. I crept as quietly as possible to see who on earth is there. Was this one of my friends playing a prank on me? As I got closer, I saw the face of a disheveled-looking homeless man. He was asleep. He was twisting, and all around him were beer cans, Monster cans, old food, packets of Snickers and stuff. My eyes opened wide as I realized that this guy was not supposed to be here, and quietly made my way out of there while running as fast as I could. When I reached the top, I called my manager, who I actually woke, and asked him if he knew that there was a homeless guy in the basement. He immediately sobered up from his sleep and told me to call the cops immediately. The cops arrived, but when they did, the man was gone. I think it was all the commotion. That's when we realized that at the back of the little booth, there is actually a secret hole that leads to one of the theaters towards the back, and then you can just go out one of the fire exits. It was incredibly weird and disturbing. My manager said he understood if I didn't want the task, but as I really needed the money, I told him to give me a week to get over it and that I'd do it anyway. It took a whole 3 weeks in order to complete the task, but the basement was looking good again, and we made sure to seal off this hidden basement door. We removed the booth, and everything was fine. I quit shortly after though, finding a better job in another town, one with a career, and tried to make something of myself. I am glad that these events happened, as it put me on the right path. But to the homeless man hiding out in the basement of the movie theater, let's never meet again.